What you're about to see is a real-life story, taken from the files of the police racket and bunco squads, business protective associations, and similar sources all over the country. It is intended to expose the confidence game, the carefully worked-out frauds by which confidence men take more money each year from the American public than all the bank robbers and thugs with their violence.
Hello, my name is Molly Olson, and I'm the volunteer director and co-founder of CPR, the Center for Parental Responsibility. CPR was formed to meet the need for information and collaboration among non-custodial parents who have decided to change our current family law system for the benefit of children. The problem we face is simple. It is family court orders excommunicating fit parents from their children 24 days of the month and then enforcing those orders with the police power of the state. For most parents, this is heartbreaking, and for me, it's intolerable. CPR exists to remove the obstacles that prevent both parents from being fully and equally involved in the lives of their children. CPR is a 100% volunteer organization. We need you to contribute your time and talent to further our efforts. We are bringing more and more like-minded people together every day, building a critical mass to restore parental rights and ensure children have equal access to both parents. CPR is a faith-based organization founded on Christian principles. We find our guidance from the God of the Bible, though we honor and respect everyone, regardless of religious preference. I urge you to become involved in CPR. Join with other parents who have been through the family court system who are eager to share their experiences. Together, we will be the voice of the people who respect the family and value children. Hello and welcome back to CPR-TV, our show for the family law reform community. I'm Molly Olson, founder and director of the Center for Parental Responsibility, and we're so glad you've joined us for this show. And Stanley, I always appreciate the value that you add to our program as my co-host.
Molly, it's always a thrill to be here with you and our viewers, but this is a show I'm especially excited about.
Some of our regular viewers already know that Stanley, as an attorney, has dedicated his life and career to returning the rule of law and respect for the Constitution back into family court where it belongs. And Stanley, that couldn't fit more perfectly into this program.
That's right, Molly. Our American family law system is broken and broken badly because it is so very harmful to children. Our guest will explain how and why in an extraordinarily powerful way. I'm truly excited about this show, so let's begin.
In this episode of CPR-TV, we present Dr. Patrick Fagan. Dr. Fagan is a senior research fellow in family and cultural issues at the Heritage Foundation. He is recognized worldwide as an expert on family life and religious practice and their impact upon the well-being of our nation. Dr. Fagan is a native of Ireland, where he received his training as a psychologist and earned his doctorate in social policy from University College Dublin. Before becoming involved in public policy analysis, he was a therapist specializing in family matters. Dr. Fagan has experience as a high-level government official in Washington. For example, he served as Deputy Assistant Secretary in the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. In addition to Dr. Fagan's media appearances on CBS, CNN, and NBC, he has written or co-authored research papers too numerous to mention, along with several books. In 2001, the Heritage Foundation honored Dr. Fagan with a special award for his outstanding contribution to the analysis and promotion of the Free Society. We are honored and profoundly grateful to have as our guest on CPR-TV, Dr. Patrick Fagan.
Molly, it may be helpful for our viewers to know more about the Heritage Foundation. Founded in 1973, the Heritage Foundation is located in Washington, D.C. It is a truly unique organization, a public policy research institution or a think tank.
Using world-class resources and research, the Heritage Foundation scholars formulate and promote public policies. In short, they define solutions to the major social problems facing America. These solutions are based on their beliefs that the best government is one that shows favor to no one, concentrates on its core functions, and recognizes its limits.
In the year 2000, the Heritage Foundation published a research paper of extraordinary importance. Written by Dr. Patrick F. Fagan and Robert Rector, it is entitled The Effects of Divorce on America. This research paper should be required reading for every American, but most certainly for policymakers at every level of government.
In this program, Dr. Fagan presents some of the most significant and profound aspects of this landmark work. And now we introduce you to Dr. Patrick Fagan.
As a result of both divorce and out-of-wedlock births, what we have in the country is a massive fracturing of family, and less of our children are growing up in the unified family, where a mother and father, the natural family, I want to call it, the biological mother, the biological father, together raising their children. What this is leading to, very controversial thing to say, but we are growing people who are less and less capacity than their parents or their grandparents. Rather than growing them taller, we're growing them smaller. And smaller in every way. And we can see indications of that. Look at the rise in crime, the amount of people who get into serious violent crime, the rise in abuse, the rise in sexual abuse. These are not things that are out there. These are the sorts of people we are growing. We are growing more and more seriously damaged, seriously damaging people. And we can see that on the extremes and those things that lead to mental health breakdown, lack of health. The children of divorce, by the way, die on average 4 years younger. So we're not growing them even with the capacity to live longer, even with our increase in health services and all of the rest. The adults will die younger. But the same thing is happening in the mental health, the same thing is happening in all sorts of capacities. We are growing, if I could use the word pygmies, more and more, rather than people of tall stature. We won't even have the capacity to run our own country. And we can see it all around, we can feel it. Who would much prefer, which would you much prefer, to have a neighborhood, your neighborhood, wherever you live now, the way it is today or the way it was in 1950? Inner city Philadelphia, inner city DC, Southwest DC, which is the place with more problems than anywhere else. Would you prefer Southwest DC in 1950 or Southwest DC in the year 2000? What sort of nation, what sort of culture has brought about that change? Which is the stronger? Where would we prefer to live? The answers are pretty clear. We're in deep crisis because the primary relationship in any society, that between the father and the mother, has been broken and severed for the vast majority of our American children. For every 100 born, 60 now enter a broken family before age 18.
Stanley, Patrick Fagan has such a loving, caring, fatherly, grandfatherly way of sharing his concerns with us about what's happening in our society as a result of all these family law problems. And he helps us understand what's wrong, why it's wrong, what the impact is, and that can really be affirming to those who are listening to our program who've been through family court, who understand once they've been through it, something is very wrong with this system.
He takes it from that individual perspective, and from his perspective as a researcher, broadens our view so that we can see what's happening to our whole society. And it's extraordinary when he ends this segment by saying if the trends continue as they are, where over the last 50 years, as he tells us, we've moved for every 100 children born from 12 born into a fractured or incomplete family setting to 60 over a 50-year period, what will it be like for the children in another 50 years? How far that can go, how fast that can go. We simply have to stop for a moment and ask ourselves, have we already somehow reached some sort of point of no return?
We're past the tipping point.
Well, we may have, and certainly if that trend continues, what he suggests is that at some point we won't even have the capacity to run our country, is a very sobering thought.
It's profound. It makes you just want to stop and think about that for a minute. What does that mean, and why would that occur? Well, it seems to me that, as you mentioned too, if people have a growing less capacity, a generation after generation, less capacity to be in relationship, that they don't learn how to cooperate, they don't learn how to negotiate, they don't learn how to be in a relationship, they don't learn about the power of conflict resolution and how you find a win-win solution so everybody can win, rather than this whole system that's based on win, lose, and fighting, and saying mean things about each other, rather than just really how are we going to make this work, rather than how can we fight to show that this isn't going to work.
I think when he referred to growing pygmies, or people of smaller stature rather than taller stature, he was obviously referring to their character. And when we systemically produce a broader and growing population of incomplete or I guess for lack of a better word, emotionally stunted people, that creeps into every aspect of society. And we're seeing the effects, and we've talked about those over and over on the show. And what really is profound is the emergence just in the last 5 to 10 years of virulent social pathologies that are plaguing children now. Those can no longer be ignored.
Well, and we've heard a lot about emotional intelligence. There's a lot of books that have been written about emotional intelligence, and I can see how that intelligence would be damaged by this whole culture of rejection that Patrick Fagan has mentioned. And we think about how the whole family court system systematically removes, and assumes they're going to have to remove one fit, loving parent from the life of that child when it comes to divorce and paternity actions. And, that has got to be one of the most traumatic things for a child, to have one of their parents suddenly taken away. They're suddenly extremely limited in how much they can see that other parent. They do not have ready access to that other parent. And it's been mentioned to me before, and I think it's quite stunning to think about this too, about we hesitate to take a toy away from a child. We hesitate. We think about that, even when the child shouldn't be having that toy or is making trouble with that toy. We hesitate to take that toy away, and yet we're taking parents away every single day in family court.
Well, and the consequences for the child are personally devastating. There's no question that a great deal of the urgency that we have about this work comes from the fact that every single day, with 3,000 divorces across this great nation, we are affecting literally thousands of children every day with this negative input. And when we accept that we are inflicting upon them a culture of rejection, it ought to concern us obviously for the children who suffer that themselves, but those who have not been touched by this need to recognize that their children, even for a child of an intact family, now dwells in a school setting and in social relationships with these children who dwell in this culture of rejection, and their needs and their deficits will pull down the child of the intact family and place that child at risk just from the peer pressure and the other aspects of the interrelationship with this 60% of the population of children who are now dwelling in that culture of rejection. We have so much more to share with our viewers, Molly, but for now our time is up. We must move on. Please stay tuned.
You're watching CPR-TV.
Divorce, sexual harassment, same-sex marriage, campus rape, domestic violence, sex trafficking, transgender bathrooms, child abuse, bullying, women and gays in the military. What do they all have in common? Is there some larger agenda behind it all? I'm Stephen Baskerville, and I wrote a book to answer those questions. My book is The New Politics of Sex. Get my book and read it, The New Politics of Sex, a book by Stephen Baskerville.
I think death would be easier than a divorce.
It's very frustrating to have gone for help and then come out with your family destroyed.
We have serious problems in our family law court system.
Getting divorced is far from easy.
Litigation lasted for over a year.
I was married only 4 months, and my divorce has lasted over 6.5 years.
Close to 8 years.
8 years.
Why is divorce so difficult?
People can get as much justice as they can afford. And most people cannot afford any justice at all.
What's wrong with that? This is a business.
The more you charge, the more people are willing to pay.
They didn't give me a lawyer. Pay this $11,000 or go to jail. It really got to the end of the line for me.
I said to the litigants, I want you to know, after 2 hours, we will have spent more than most people in this courthouse make in a year.
Your home, your valuables are all going to be sold to pay the lawyers and people like me.
Even though I was acquitted, he still made a decision to take my son away from me. His birthday was last week and I didn't get to see him.
What you have is a tinderbox, and the lawyers are throwing gasoline on that fire.
The system is designed to create conflict.
I received a phone call for another $25,000. He'd be able to give us what we wanted. Extortion?
Family court results in more violence than any other area of law.
Deaths, suicide, murder.
No jury, just the one biased judge.
The judge says, even if you win, you have to pay.
The whole thing is just insane.
Follow the money.
Family courts only grant shared parenting to 20% of divorced or split families.
That means 28 million children are being raised without one of their parents.
If my parents share parenting, I'll have fewer stress-related illnesses.
If my parents share parenting, I'll be less likely to engage in delinquent behavior.
If my parents share parenting,
I'll be more likely to graduate high school and college.
I'll be less likely to abuse drugs, alcohol, and nicotine.
I will be less likely to suffer from depression. I'll be less likely to become pregnant as a teenager.
I'll be less likely to become a teen father.
I'll be more likely to have positive relationships with my grandparents.
If my parents share parenting,
they would be more likely to be in my child's life.
One of the first things you taught me is how to share. Share parenting.
Studies have proven that shared parenting makes healthier, happier children.
I think the idea that if there were equal distribution of custody, the father doesn't have to write a check because the father is giving equal care. This is an issue of fairness, it's an issue of civil rights for children, it's an issue of equal protection under the law, and it's an issue of justice. It's all of that. It's a common sense fairness issue, and I can't stress enough the hypocrisy of saying it's in the best interest of a child to have one custodial parent and another visitor that writes a check, not even to the child, but to the custodial parent. That's better than equal time with both parents or each parent. It's just ridiculous.
Do you have a heart for children?
I love children, and I know you do too.
But we have a big problem.
Our children are being hurt by family court nonsense. This must stop.
It's time to restore the fundamental right of every child to the care and custody of both parents without family court micromanagement.
CPR, the Center for Parental Responsibility, is working to help children by protecting their relationship with both parents, because children thrive with both parents in their lives.
You're watching CPR-TV, a public service of the Center for Parental Responsibility.
If you look at this trajectory from 1950 to the year 2000, where it went up, you'll see the huge spike in the breakdown of the family with the introduction of no-fault divorce. And even the feminist scholars now, looking back at the impact of no-fault divorce, they can see it was a booster. There are things in the culture adding to divorce. No-fault divorce law added massively to it. And then it changed the culture, because it changed the conceptions of marriage, and in turn changed the conception of sexuality, lots of things. So no-fault divorce law a primary action, a major action by government, by law schools, by law professors, by courts, judges, Supreme Court judges. We had a concerted effort among our elite in something that actually they put in place that has helped deconstruct our society. That is one of the major contributors to us growing people of smaller stature rather than bigger.
Stanley, Patrick Fagan in this clip claims that things really changed with the advent of no-fault divorce. He says that no-fault divorce, the decision for that, created almost a domino effect. We get the impression that just has ruined our society and given us what we have today as family law.
Well, that's true, Molly. And when you look back through the lens of history at the timing of no-fault divorce, as he says, there was cultural change afoot. But feeding no-fault divorce law into that cultural dynamic was like feeding it a steady, massive diet of steroids. It just went exponentially in terms of changing the culture. Phenomenal turning point in the history of this nation.
Well, and that turning point was created, he says, by the lawyers, the government, the law professors, judges, Supreme Court judges, he names as all part of the scheme and part of the cultural elite that really were working to deconstruct our society. Do you agree?
Unfortunately, I do agree, Molly, and we have the historical record and the documentary proof that shows conclusively that cultural elite did create no-fault divorce out of whole cloth. It was not out of any public outcry or any strong grassroots sentiment for change in family law. It was motivated by lawyers, judges, and law professors, and in a process that's beyond the scope of our show today, but basically a select group of these lawyers, judges, and law professors crafted a model divorce act without any accountability to their legislatures, without accountability to the people. And having created that, they then took it back to their states and presented it to the states as a done deal. And the states bought it, as we say where I come from, they swallowed it hook, line, and sinker, but it was a fraud.
So these cultural elite that we were talking about, lawyers, law professors, judges, government officials, were acting as a shadow legislature almost, creating more power for themselves than they really should have ever had.
It's got sinister overtones, and there's no question that similar select groups had done very good work in making uniform law changes or model law changes in other areas of the law. But when it came to divorce law, there was a very sinister and fraudulent element to the process. They were aware that in Russia, a postcard divorce system had been in place in which someone who wanted a divorce simply went to a clerk, filled out the paperwork, and the clerk sent the spouse a notice or a postcard notifying them that they were divorced. There was a movement within the process to do a similar clerical function for American divorce, and we have the transcripts that conclusively show they not only knew that, they talk about how they could never sell that to the American people, and so in order to conceal it and yet accomplish the ends that they desired, they took that clerical or ministerial process that was so effective in Russia and they packaged it in our court system. They had a judge run it. They gave it the black robes, the gavel, the flags, all the trappings of a legal process. But when you look at what happens in no-fault divorce and how the innocent party is defenseless and the wrongdoer or the guilty is empowered and it's unilateral, when you realize historically that concept came from Russia, it should be no surprise that it doesn't feel American. And when I say that it's antithetical to the American rule of law, that's what I'm talking about. The things that are in no-fault divorce and child custody and other key areas of family law today is so un-American it makes my blood boil.
Well, un-American for sure, and as I understand the little bit of research I've done, I'm not the expert on this issue as you are and some others are, but the whole philosophy of the postcard divorce, as I understand it, was to intentionally, the government's intentional process to destroy the role of the church and the family in their society to make everyone dependent on the government. To me, that's really scary if that's what's happening in America. I see that happening in America.
What's happening in America now is what happened in Russia because the Russian government wanted to deconstruct Russian society, which was built on the foundation of the church and the family. That same intent was in play, and what we see happening to our society now is, as Patrick Fagan rightly puts, a deconstruction of our society as a result of law changes put in place by a cultural elite. It's mind-boggling in the magnitude of the effect that it's had on the American people. We simply have to face that we've all been defrauded by this process. It has shredded the lives of millions of people over the last 35 years, and as far as family court goes in the process, it's shredded the rule of law and respect for our Constitution as well.
Well, we've given our viewers a glimpse of the history of no-fault divorce and how it's had an impact on all of this. I'm sure they'd be eager to hear even more, as we'd be eager to hear more and discuss more as well. But our time is up for this segment, so please stay tuned.
You're watching CPR-TV.
Former child support collection agent turned whistleblower and author, Carol Rhodes.
The Child Support Enforcement Agency became something that had nothing to do with children except money, except an excuse to bring in money, to build up the bureaucracy, and the more money they brought in, the more successful the states would be at sucking these federal dollars. You know, it's just whoever gets to them first, and the states are just fighting with each other to get those federal dollars, and the federal government was all too willing to continue to perpetuate this system.
Friend of the Court, Enemy of the Family, the book that exposes corruption in child support.
The statistics are that more money passes through family law court than all the other courts combined.
My rate is $950 an hour.
The real standard is how much money can we make off these people?
It's unethical. It is unconscionably unethical.
All judges have the same middle name, God.
I've come to the unfortunate conclusion that no one is holding them accountable for their actions.
Are you embroiled in a divorce or custody battle? Have you been unjustly accused of domestic violence or child abuse? Have you been ordered to pay extortionate sums in child support? My name is Stephen Baskerville. I am a political science professor and author of a new book. Taken into Custody explains the legal underworld of family law, a world some believe is little more and nothing less than a system of organized crime. If you have been through family court, you need this book.
I've decided to have a few words with you from the CPR-TV production studio. We've just finished taping an upcoming show. Now that Molly has gone home for the day, I have a chance to talk to you one-on-one. It has been such an honor and a privilege for me to work with all of the people who bring this show to you. But I want to make sure you understand one thing. CPR is an all-volunteer organization. Molly and the others who are working so hard for family law reform have other demands on their time. They have their own full-time jobs. But they make time for CPR because they recognize its incredible importance. Our mission is so very valuable to the many children and parents who are needlessly damaged by the current family law system. Won't you become a CPR volunteer? Just a little bit of your time will go a long, long way. We have many projects underway. I'm sure there is a place for you. Please volunteer. I know you'll be glad you did. You're watching CPR-TV, a public service of the Center for Parental Responsibility.
We are right in our effort to change the status quo and demand family law reform. We urge you to join us in this national movement. CPR is an organization local to Minnesota, but we are known nationally as we are a key player in the family law reform movement that is sweeping our nation. Thanks, Stanley, and we're glad you joined us. Please tell others about the show. See you next time on CPR-TV, our show for the family law reform community. Thanks for watching.
What we have just shown you exposes them for what they really are: lying, dirty, shrewd, godless, determined, and international criminal conspiracy.